Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. I'm speaking today with Mr. Peter Wang. Peter is one of the most influential leaders and coders within the Python community. He's a former physicist who now serves as the co-founder and the CEO of Anaconda. We all know Anaconda. It's probably the world's most popular data science platform. Peter, thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. So glad to be here.
The Alfie Whattam podcast.
So I want to start on the topic of education. You recently tweeted something very, very interesting, and I'll show the tweet on the screen. But you said, I just had like a 20-minute conversation with GPT about the history of modern physics. If I had this shit as a tutor during high school and college, OMG, I think we can basically reinvent the concept of education at scale. College, as we know it, will cease to exist. Okay, that's an interesting point. Obviously got very popular on Twitter. What do you mean by reinvent education? You know, if college ceases to exist, you know, what are we replacing it with? What are your thoughts on that?
So yeah, people really misunderstood this. And I guess this is the nature of Twitter, is to be misunderstood, because you get 280 characters, knock yourself out, right? But what I meant is that, so I'm a big advocate of education. I love teaching and I love learning, and I always have my entire life. A lot of things I did early on as a founder at Anaconda was I would go around teaching Python courses, and I would teach tutorials and workshops at the conferences. And I love teaching. I love teaching kids. I love teaching adult learners. I just love teaching and I love learning. So for me, I don't, it is incorrect to interpret that statement as saying education is done. In fact, it's the exact opposite. That education should be so pervasive, should be so personalized, should be so cheap and accessible that everyone is able to learn the things they are interested in and pursue education and pursue their curiosity at any level, anytime, anywhere, any topic. You can sort of see it up here. That's my there. Okay, it's my diploma from Cornell University, right? And the vision of the founders of that university was to create a university where anyone could find education in whatever pursuit, whatever topic. And so for me, the intent of that is that, number one, we can reinvent education at scale. Literally what I said. And number two, I think college as we currently see it will cease to exist. And it may not happen overnight. It probably won't happen overnight, but I think it'll happen really fast. And if that transformation hasn't basically already, if that transformation is not underway already by the end of the decade, then we've done something wrong. So I totally expect for us to be transforming the concept of secondary education, higher education, and postgraduate education and whatnot. And continuing education, which is oftentimes an underrated topic. So what I mean is that right now, the institutions of education, well, they're institutions, and they were formed around a time when access to qualified teachers was the bottleneck. Just like in the early days of communications, bandwidth was the bottleneck. And then the internet instantly flipped that around in the space of about 10 or 15 years, to where bandwidth was no longer the bottleneck and attention became then the scarce resource, right? So with education, I think it's a very similar thing. We're going to flip this around to where people will generally have access to a tremendous amount of amazing materials. We already have that. When you look at the quality of educational materials around math and science and history and so many other things on YouTube with amazing content creators, right? Math content from Khan Academy, from the three blue, one brown, three brown, one. I can never quite get it right. But then really great, wonderful content like Kurzgesagt and Veritasium, Mark Rober. I mean, you just name it. There's a history oversimplified. There's just a nonstop, amazing pile of great content out there that I would have loved to have. But that's a one-way broadcast kind of medium. And if you complement that with what we can see just in the, basically 8 to 12 months into LLMs, what we can see at scale that can afford for people, it's going to be game over, I think, in terms of actually this model of charging people something like $150,000 to go sit for 4 years to listen to some guy give a lecture he's tired of giving because he's given it for 20 years, and then have some TAs who are underpaid to go and check your homework. Like, this is not the right model anymore, clearly, right?
Yeah. Yeah. My wife got her PhD a few years back, and the amount of money it costs, when in reality it doesn't need to cost that much when you look at the tools we have available today. It's just insane, right? So it's going to be that, I think that
Yep.
cost and barrier to entry is going to significantly come down, and that's obviously great for everybody. Do you think the method and the way that the information is delivered right now is primarily through humans, human to human education? Do you think it will stay that way, or do you think tools like GPT will become the educators, and the humans will have less involvement in the delivery of the information, if that makes sense?
I think it'll be, I honestly imagine it'll be some kind of a hybrid thing. And I think for many of the things we want to learn, some of them are just personal explorations, in which case, having GPT be a glorified, like those little recorded audio tours when you go to a museum, right? It's a glorified version of one of those, but you're touring not the museum, but basically the entire museum of all human knowledge and thought and history over the last several thousand years. So you have a personalized guide and tour through that. That's awesome, but that's often not the most effective way to learn new skills, right? And so if you actually want to go and, let's say, learn how to code, right? You can actually, I mean, professional coders today are starting to use LLMs in their daily work all the time. If not to help them code, to help them debug, to help them cobble together some deployment script, or figure out some other bit of YAML. Like, it's amazing it can do that, right? You may be a really great Ruby programmer. You might not be so strong at SQL, but with Copilot or with GPT, you got a SQL buddy, right? So I think assistive coding already is there for professionals. And for learners, though, to have these things help them in a peer learning environment or in a project-based sort of like group, it's amazing. And it wouldn't have to just be like either, like GPT and individuals or nothing. I think there's sort of this like, we'll very quickly get to a point where these technologies are helping groups learn how to build things together. And that's really the amazing thing, because it can serve as a much more fluid glue between different brains on a team. And that's actually, I think, the more powerful thing.
Yeah. I love the tour example. I think that could be very beneficial when AR, really starts to take off, and you're walking around and you're seeing, prompts coming up and information that's giving you information based on what you're looking at in real time, not just audio, but visual as well. I think the combination of the two will really have a huge impact.
Well, and it's the thing is I mean, just one thing to drop in there, which is it's not just about, I think we're so used to media and information being impersonal and depersonalized and generic, being spammed at us. But imagine if you go in and you already have a personal LLM, personal sort of assistant kind of thing that's got, deeply, highly privatized, personal to you, and your phone or your device does a quick connection with the museum LLM. And it knows, for instance, I'm big into astronomy, all right? And I love astronomy. I love the history of science. I love these kinds of things. And if I'm going to an art gallery, if there's intersections with particular artists or particular paintings, or there's some scientist who this was the inspiration for them to do this thing, or let's say we're seeing some painting by Leonardo da Vinci and there's some connection to some math thing, I want to know that, right? And it can make a deeply more personalized tour for me. And the same thing as if someone is into music. I also happen to really be into music. So if there's a connection with music or musical history, like that's the kind of thing that you would really be able to get, right? And it's mind-boggling how much more meaning there is to be minted in the world if we have an assistant that can scan all of this and bring into focus for us the things that we are interested in and that we care about.
Yeah. I noticed from a social media perspective, you're really into Bluesky. I see you have butterflies behind you. I'm not sure if there's any connection there, but
I do have some cool butterflies. I have a morpho, really some cool butterflies here all over the office.
Yeah. But it's replaced your blue tick. You haven't signed up yet. Who knows?
Wait, did they take away my blue tick?
It's gone, man. Yeah. You've Elon's sent a rocket up, and it's gone now. You're a man of the people.
I'm a man of the people. I paid him like $8. I paid that guy $8, and he took my blue check mark away. Oh well.
It may be in review if you have paid, but I was lucky enough to get one of the beta invites from Jay, and it does look super interesting. Obviously, it's a different type of social platform and that it's moving away from platforms and, and moving into something else all entirely, right? But what are your thoughts on Bluesky, and do you think there is space for another social media amongst big tech? Because you got, Facebook, Twitter.
Yeah. So my journey in Bluesky is a little bit interesting. So full disclosure, I actually am an advisor to the project, and essentially I have been personally funding decentralized internet, decentralized web, decentralized communication sort of protocol things since about 2017. So some of the thinking and some of the one of the core devs, Paul Frazee, his prior project Beaker browser and the related DAT protocol, now the Hyper protocol, those things are all developed at Beaker, which is something that I was funding. And so I actually, on my GitHub, I have a write-up called The Web We Lost. And it's a lot of my thinking at that time in 2017. And I've been going to these decentralized web camps and things that are run by the Internet Archive. I've been going to those for years. I've given some lightning talks about how decentralization is actually the wrong topic. Orthogonality is the correct thing to be talking about, not decentralization. And so there's been, even prior to, I think, last fall when Elon bought Twitter, all of a sudden everyone discovered like, oh, decentralization is a thing or whatever. But, I've been pushing on this for a very long time personally. I'm also on the board of the Center for Humane Technology. And so that's been, very critical of social media and the attention economy and the race to the bottom of the brainstem and all these things. And so for many years now, I have had a personal perspective, a philosophic perspective as a technologist and also as a humanist into what the Web 2.0, let's say centralized client server, social media, communication, attention platform experience has done to people. And so the things that I've been funding are architecturally, as a technologist, designed to actually deconstruct all of that. So the point isn't to build a replacement for Twitter. It's to actually transform the technical landscape of how sort of this particular modality of human interaction and communications could be supported in a way that's fundamentally locked open. That's a term we use, right, in this kind of space. It's not just about, oh, we built this thing and then we'll be nice and throw everyone a bone and give you an open protocol thing. No, we want to actually build it from the ground up. Core principles, the architecture of this is open protocols, open formats, so that you don't have to rely on somebody running a server at some DNS, like some IP address that can then be taken offline, that can be blocked, that can be spoofed, that can be whatever, right? There's a lot of the stuff that happens that if you think about it all the way down, you actually, there's a lightning talk I gave back in January 2017, actually. And I said, look, we actually have to basically destroy the internet, because the internet was designed to be a connectivity network of computers. It was not designed to be the substrate for rich, trustable human networks. It just so happened that if humans rent identities through, let's say, an ISP or an email provider, then you can sort of loosely proxy one on top of the other, but you still do not have trustful connection and communications. So the point of Bluesky really is to build around this protocol concept. And it is really about the protocol, not the app. So you'll see people talking about app protocol. You'll see a lot of GitHub projects popping up now, people trying to implement things that are compatible with the protocol, extending it, doing alternative feed mechanisms, doing all sorts of other kinds of things. And that's really it's sort of like the same way that the NCSA Mosaic was the first web browser. It wasn't meant to be like the app. It was meant to be one possible client on top of this new protocol called HTTP and a format called HTML. And that's what really Bluesky is, as opposed to all these other things, if that makes any sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. There seems to be a lot of hype around it, so it'll be interesting to see where it goes and that whole ecosystem.
It's amazing. It's really amazing to me. Last night I tweeted, right? I was like, "Oh, I've got some invites," and I swear all of Brazil lit up into my DMs. It was like,
me too. I've given away so many. Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a good effect.
Hey, this podcast is brought to you by WeLoveAlpha.com. If you're looking to grow and hire and scale your software engineering team in the UK, then go to WeLoveAlpha.com to hire the best software developers on the market. Everything across Java to C# to PHP to Python to React and Angular and mobile and more, go to welovealpha.com to hire the best software engineers in the UK now.
Okay, I want to touch on AI. So,
Sure.
on your episode on Lex's podcast, you stated, and I rewatched it last night in preparation for this, but you said, I don't really doubt that one day we will create a synthetic approach to cognition that rivals the biological computers in our heads. Now, you said this before the mass adoption of GPT. I think you spoke with Lex like a year and a half ago or something like that.
Yeah, it was December. It was like it went the podcast went live in December, but actually I think we recorded in October of 21.
Okay, yeah. So this was way before any kind of mainstream.
This is even before Stable Diffusion, right?
Yeah.
This is a while
back. So look, I suppose in terms of implications, if we are, and there's a different ways to read what you said there, in the same way that you could read your tweet earlier in many different ways, right? But I suppose what do you mean by what you said? Rivaling cognition, replacing biology with a synthetic approach. Are you talking about replicating consciousness, machines becoming sentient? Where are you going with this?
So there's several different assertions stacked up into that one statement.
Yeah.
And I think each of these could be true or false on their own. I personally do believe that we can create non-biological substrates for cognition, for sensing and action that emerge something like what we experience as consciousness. I personally do believe that is possible and likely.
Me too.
And there's reasons that I would argue in favor of that. Now, there's some people who believe there's some, ineffable soul type thing that's infused in there. Something I'm very much I'm not in that camp. I think humans are amazing and special. I think we represent something incredibly special and precious in the universe, but I don't believe that we are somehow the only thing that could do this kind of thing. And I think we should be able to, in our minds and in our hearts, hold space for both how precious we are and at the same time how much improvement there could be beyond us, right? Yeah. It's possible to love all those things at the same time. So, but on the specific thing about cognition, I also believe that we can actually do a lot even before this question of consciousness shows up. Carlos Perez, I think, has said some really amazing things around this, and he's got a really great perspective on this. So I'd encourage people to follow him on Twitter and sort of read some of the stuff he's written on this. He really likens the current state of LLMs, this current spate of LLMs, as artificial intuition machines. And they're not going through a process of reasoning in the way that we go through kind of a deductive or inductive approach. But that's not to say they can't get there or that we cannot build a mechanism starting with LLMs. I think Jim Rutt has made some comments about this as well. I think it's what LLMs are able to do right now are both notable in terms of how much like human-like text synthesis and idea things they can generate without having a mind there. I think there's no mind behind an LLM. I think there's an amazing latent representation of a human knowledge graph and relationships and human concepts. And so when we do simple things like hit it with a prompt, it's able to generate some amazing things on the other side. But that's more almost a statement about the amazingness of the latent knowledge in the human corpus of text that it processed and trained on than it is a statement about some architecture of these, matrix multiplies being close to sentience or something like that. That being said, I think if you couple this then with some additional kinds of architectures, you could absolutely build something which builds a self-model. So I think one of the most mind-blowingly great works I've read in this area of mind and consciousness and cognition is a body of work by a guy named Thomas Metzinger. And I might have referenced him in the Lex Fridman podcast that I did. And Thomas Metzinger has a model of cognition that is a model of consciousness. I think is it's very lovely, very elegant. And so I think we can absolutely we should at least make a good try to build some, computational silicon-based approaches to that. And I think we might get pretty close.
So you're not for Elon and Woz's pause on AI advancement. You think we should be
Actually, I was for that. I was for that. Yes, because I do think, and the reason, and this might seem contradictory. Like on the one hand, I think all these great things that are possible. I think we should do them. At the same time, I think we're moving too fast right now. And so the relationship between these thoughts, how I hold all these different seemingly contradictory thoughts in my mind, is that with the LLM technologies that we're seeing, one could argue even with social media technologies, we reached a point of technological sophistication where the technology ran ahead of human values and societal values. And I think that's bad. I think that's incorrect, an incorrect approach. I think it is incredibly important for us to actually, as individuals, as communities, and as societies, communities of communities, I think it's important for all of us to actually get to have a grounded conversation around what it is we want to see the stuff do. And so it's sort of like we let technology just take the lead and just do whatever, because if you hook everyone up to broadband, you give people ability to publish websites, what could go wrong? That just seems awesome and democratizing and And so we didn't see the dark side of that until you got everyone's data concentrated. You started building these data centers, you build digital twins of people. You start computationally propagandizing and manipulating people at scale. Oh, well, maybe that's not good. And so now you see regulation trying to catch up on the back end. We can't afford to do that with LLMs. We actually have to give lawmakers and have to give individuals a chance to understand what's about to happen to them. Right? I think the parable would be like if you just invented a musket or a firearm, and then everyone starts making firearms at home. It's like, oh, that might be a problem. But even then, it's like a front-loading musket. How much damage could it do? And then if people invent suitcase nukes at home that everyone could build, now we really have to have a conversation, because the scale at which things can go wrong and the possible impact of that is way bigger than if someone just makes a musket and goes a little nuts, right? So I think this is the thing we're talking about with LLMs, especially if you just track how quickly the text to voice synthesis has been going, and then the real-time video mask and video filter stuff has been going. It's alarming. And so unless there is some immediate stuff coming in here to where the government says, you know what, as societal safeguards, as the guardians of social order, we actually assert our right to actually have an opinion on how this rolls out. And furthermore, as a society, as a civilization, we demand that technology be put in service of human values and not vice versa. Technology is out there and the human values just become whatever they are, right? Like that, I think, is why I support something like maybe, a pause is actually only one implementation. The ultimate goal that I support is having the population of people that be impacted by technology, having them understand what's about to happen, what it means, what it can do, and having them feel like they have a voice and agency in a societal conversation about the impact. I think that's really important.
I think it's a very optimistic idea to think that we'll have a pause, because even if we're able to make that happen in one or two countries, there'll be other countries in the world that just continue the advancement, and it gets better and better and better, and the AI starts creating AI, which creates AI, and so on and so forth. So I'm nervous and scared about where this is going when you have something which you believe could become potentially self-aware, which is hooked up to nuclear weapons and all kinds of everything, the energy grid and everything in between, right? Are you not like me, laying in bed worrying a little bit at night, or where do you leave?
I mean, there's a lot to worry about, but at the same time, I think it is entirely possible. If you look at, for instance, consider the fact that here in the States and in the West, we've talked about how much social media here has caused political disruption, has caused polarization, all these different kinds of things. And a lot of that's Facebook, some of that's YouTube. It's all these algorithmic driven sort of rat holes. And you look at China and they're like, no Facebook. The firewall is like, no Facebook. None. Sorry. No Facebook. And so it's like, what? Wait, you could just do that? Like you could just say we don't want this influencing our people? Like we could do that? So I think with the AI thing, it's similar. I mean, China is going to have its own sort of AI sort of stuff going on that they have to contend with. Every country is going to have this kind of thing. And so if our first step is to say, hold on, at least we can say put the brakes on this until we figure out what the right deployment policy is, right? I don't know if you saw the Center for Humane Technology just released this YouTube on YouTube released a video, the AI dilemma, which is just a small parcel, a nugget of thinking from Tristan and Asa about where this stuff is going. And in there, they show like, you know, the Snapchat interaction they had, the Snapchat my AI thing.
Yeah.
And I actually just on my Snapchat, I saw that my AI thing just got turned on like this week, right? And it's like, I'm your friendly AI here to talk with you. I'm like,
the bot. Yeah.
like, okay, is Snapchat going to sign up for every possible bit of legal liability from this, right? I think a lot of the big social tech media platforms, they're used to sitting under the shadow or under the umbrella, the shade of this Communication Decency Act, Section 230, which says that you're not responsible for content from user-generated content is not the responsibility of the platform. The instant they start having their own LLMs running, generating stuff, if it's libelous, if it's slanderous, if it's causing kids to go like commit suicide, guess what? The platform is liable. And I think it's going to be about 2 seconds before the board of directors tells people to shut this down.
Yeah.
Because the lawsuits are going to start flying. I mean, there's already that guy in Europe who killed himself from his interaction with the Chai.ai chatbot.
Yeah.
And it's like, guys, like, can we please just actually look at this seriously? And you may be right that if someone stops here, other people may not stop over there. But if we stop it here, or we at least put a pause and say the government does actually have a right to intercede on some of the stuff, then other countries may follow suit as well. And, you know, you might not stop it entirely, but you could actually, you know, you can change the nature of the stuff pretty quick. If we just say, oh, we don't see how this one move solves all the problems, and so therefore we don't even make the smallest move, then yes, that's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So that's kind of my view on this. I think that it is entirely possible for us to have a legal and regulatory framework around the use of people's data, their likeness, the use of all of this content that's been scraped off the internet that many people like to claim is fair use, but like maybe it isn't fair use if you can go and generate art in exactly the same style as other artists, right? So there's a lot of legal gray area. There's plenty of room for regulators to come in, at least put in some temporary provisions to say, okay, these areas, you can't deploy this to kids. You cannot make this available. If you go and put this on your platform, you, the platform owner, are responsible for every token coming out of that token generator, right? They should have put some of this stuff in place, and then people continue research. But before they actually deploy it in a way that's potentially toxic and harmful, they at least stop and think about what they're doing, which right now, no one's thinking about what they're doing. It's a race for VC dollars to just blow up, you know, some API on top of ChatGPT. So
And most,
sorry for the rant, but that's
you're right, Pete. I mean, most VCs don't even understand what they're getting into. I mean, they just see the word AI and boom, it's money being thrown at them, right? So, I mean, often it was the case with Web3, you know, a year or two ago, right? So, history repeats itself. I haven't seen the exact video that you're referring to, but I do love the podcast from the Center of Humane Technology, and I think they were involved in a social dilemma documentary.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, that movie. I mean, Tristan was you know, kind of one of the main people in it, and she was very involved with Exposure Labs in making that. And that was unfortunately trying to close the barn doors after the horse had already been let out, right? It was just trying to drive awareness to people of what a simple little, you know, infinite scrolling feed does to your psychology. Now we're trying to get ahead of it a little bit. So if you go and you look for Center for Humane Technology AI Dilemma, that's the video I'm talking about. It's definitely worth a watch. And you'll see the shocking interaction, the Snapchat my AI interaction thing they talk about. It's a thing.
Hey, really quick video just to give you a free subscription to Coda magazine. Coda is the #1 publication for all the latest tech news, expert insights, and exclusive industry interviews. With Coda, you get the inside scoop on what's happening with Elon Musk, with Bill Gates, with Jeff Bezos, with Mark Zuckerberg, and so much more. So if you work in the technology industry, then I'd highly recommend that you give Coda a read today. Just scan the QR code on the screen for free access now, or go to welovealpha.com/magazine to get your free subscription today.
thing I didn't have on the agenda, but I did want to ask now that I've seen the rocket behind you, and I did remember that, of course, you are into astronomy. Obviously, pretty breaking news yesterday with Elon and Starship. From my perspective, I think it's absolutely unbelievable. It's a historic moment. It's the biggest ever moving object, I believe, and successfully launched. But you go to the legacy media, and the headline is Elon's failed, the rocket's blown up, and is this the end of SpaceX? I saw. What's your take on what happened yesterday, and is perhaps an example like the BBC example the other day of why the legacy media is perhaps using the word legacy to describe them?
Well, one important thing so first of all, I think it was a huge success, right? Yeah. I think if you go and you say, look, we're going to build a big ass rocket, and if it doesn't just explode altogether on the launch pad, because how many engines were firing on that thing is incredible.
The thrusters,
if this thing, if it even pops up a little bit, like that's a success, right? Yeah. And then they got it to fly to max Q, which is like, holy crap. So, I mean, no, totally a success. And this is the problem with trying to do the work in public. And this is actually, to some extent, my thing about why it's important for the public to have a chance to actually understand what's going on. If they continue to wait on, I'll say, legacy modes of informationing to help them do sense making around this current moment in history, then they're going to always continue to be left behind, confused, feel disempowered, and all these different things, right? And so that's like, if you watch, there's a great movie called The Right Stuff, which is about, you know, the Apollo, Mercury, all the way to Apollo and Gemini and all these things. And one of the great things in the middle of that movie is they have like all these shots of like the failed rocket launches and explosions on the launch pads and all these things. You know, this guy right here didn't go up except through a whole bunch of exploding rockets either. Right? That's just kind of what happens. So I think it's absolutely, you know, you're making a very good point that when traditional media basically holds itself to such a low bar and it makes so little demands of its audience that it feels like it has to spoon feed them like they're fifth graders, then guess what? You're going to filter. What you're actually doing is you're filtering for an audience that self-selects into wanting a fifth grader level of understanding of the world. And those people are going to continue to be, again, confused. They're not going to be able to understand what's going on. They're going to, you know, just be kind of clueless. And so, but that's also, that dynamic is of course shifting quite a bit, but it's hard. I think one thing to just really for everyone to be aware of is we are going through a historic moment in human civilization right now. It cannot, you know, this is the feasibility that we've seen around LLMs and what they could do. You know, it's at least as important as the invention of the PC. It's probably as important as the invention of electricity or the printing press. Yeah. Right. It is that level of foundational transformation. Most people living today are aware that they've gone through kind of an important, like they're living very different than people 100 years ago. So they're probably aware they've kind of gone through a bit. I don't think they have any clue of what's about to happen. Because it is an exponentiating technology. Once you throw LLMs at drug discovery, material science, supply chain optimization, economics, policy, modeling out the effects of policy and being able to call politicians on it before they get elected, like we can change everything about how this works, all of it. But first we have to have the courage to do it. The innovators and the visionaries doing it have to not be, you know, killed by people with pitchforks that have a fifth grade level understanding about the world, right? I think that's kind of an important moment that we have to get through here in history.
For me, the post-GPT era, I actually use that term a lot.
The chattening. After the chattening.
It feels like the first time where I felt exponential growth happen. You know, if you look at any chart, right, it tends just to go up and up and up and up, and it feels like we're now at that point where more is going to start to happen in a month than happened in a year, then more will happen in a week than happened in a month, then more in a day than a week, and so on. And I feel like that's going to actually start being felt by people, not just read about in theory, but people are going to see that in their day-to-day lives. And we're seeing that with every company trying to jump on AI, and most of it's going to collapse. But a lot of, some of these examples are going to take off, and they'll, in 2023, there'll probably be a couple of companies built this year which don't exist right now, which will become billion-dollar companies. Which, dare I say, it will
only
be
a couple.
I mean,
only a couple.
A lot.
I think it's gonna be quite a few of them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're going to have, look at Midjourney, it's got like 11 people. I mean, there's going to be teams of really, really small, talented people, which are just going to run around the rings around the big corporates that haven't innovated and haven't kept up, similar to the legacy media example, which we talked about, right? Whereas a podcast nowadays can get more views than Fox News or CNN, which is amazing. But it seems like it's an amazing time to be alive, but it seems like the place to be right now is Austin, Texas. Where
Is it?
well, I don't know. You tell me. Everybody,
I keep flying to the Bay Area because a lot of really smart people in the Bay Area working on AI. But yeah, I'd love for Austin to become a center of AI. I think it'd be a really fantastic thing to do here. There's a lot of really smart people here. There's a lot of really good stuff happening. But it's a distributed thing that's happening all over the world. That's part of the exponential thing. It's that, again, where are the 11 Midjourney people? I don't know where they're located. Doesn't matter. They're on Discord. Right. So it's sort of like that's and you're right that there's a lot of amazing value being built, but it's also commoditizing. So it's not that necessarily that the biggest impact people or projects will be able to make all the money either. It's not clear at all where the money's going to get made in AI. That's one of the really stunning and interesting things. It's a greenfield, lots of great value to be built, but then how to make money off of it is still a very open question. OpenAI has raised a ton of money. They spend a lot of it paying for GPU clouds, right? Same thing with Stability. They raise a lot of money and they're paying for compute. And so there's a lot of money being paid to infrastructure companies to actually run the GPUs, but who's actually retaining and building differentiated, defensible, long-time durable, defensible value? That remains yet to be seen.
Why is Austin taking off, do you think? Because it's not just in the tech world, like comedy, for example. You had Rogan over there, and loads of people have followed him from that perspective. So it's not just about a hub for science and tech. It's a hub for the arts. It's a hub for culture. A lot of people talk about the freedom that you have over there and everything else in between. And I know you're saying you're going to San Fran quite a lot because there's obviously still a lot of amazing talent there. But it does seem like there is obviously a lot of issues happening over there. A lot of crime and everything else in between, right? Where you don't seem to have that problem as much in Texas.
Well, I've been here 19 years. So I've been seeing it go up and up and up for a while. And during COVID, it absolutely exploded because people could work from home. And a lot of people in California, Bay Area, they didn't particularly like what they were seeing over there. And it was expensive. And coming to Texas, you could buy a lot with a lot less money than you could buy in San Francisco and the Bay Area. So there was some of that. But then additionally, politically, Texas is very different than California. Now, Austin, for those who don't know, Texas is pretty politically conservative, but Austin actually is pretty liberal. And it's been this little blue ocean in the middle of this state, this fairly red state. But even as a red state, for those who are not familiar with American politics, the conservative states are called the red states versus the more liberal progressive ones are called the blue states. And there's a north-south divide, as there oftentimes is. There's some guns, germs, steel sort of biology is destiny, or sorry, geography is destiny sort of stuff here. But actually Texas, I grew up in Tennessee. And so the southern states that were involved in the Confederacy and stuff like that, Texas is actually a little distinct from those, that it was formerly its own country. It's got more of a libertarian conservative bent than the other states. So even as a red state, I would say that Texas has its own flavor. And then Austin being extremely progressive, liberal, hippie. I mean, Janis Joplin's here, Willie Nelson. These are pretty progressive, hippie, liberal people. And it's actually Austin, the University of Texas being here, and then some early semiconductor stuff happened here, and then Dell Computers is here. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff building here in tech, in Austin as a tech place, but it was still pretty small. Last 15 years has just seen this explosion, and last 5 in particular. Part of it is, I think, people coming out of California, coming here, the climate, it's nice and warm. You don't have to deal with snow and ice and sleet like you do in the Northeast. The favorable tax sort of situation for people. There's no state income tax. And then there's just a lot of land. So you could buy a big ranch and stuff like that. So a lot of those things, I think, all combine. And then I think it went through some phase transition the last few years.
I can't remember the exact size, but I think Texas is bigger than it's bigger than the UK, but it might be bigger than Europe or certainly many of the big countries in there combined. So you have the land. I'll definitely give you that, and there's room to be there. Okay, cool. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on. It was great to get your perspectives, Peter, into a couple of interesting areas, from AI to social media to education and beyond. Really, I will obviously put your links on the screen. I'll also put your Bluesky on there. I'm not sure if anyone's linked to Bluesky on a
Bluesky
podcast
just
before,
yeah.
so we'll be trailblazers in that one. But
There we go.
Thanks for coming on, man. Great to get your insights, and thank you to everybody for.
Well, thank you, Alfie, for having me. This has been a fun conversation. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for watching this podcast. Make sure that you like, subscribe, follow, comment, etc., etc. And I'll see you in the next episode.